So in today's video, I wanted to take some time to focus in on this idea that Sony has really shown their commitment and they've proved their commitment to single player games in 2019 to the point where going forward with the PlayStation 5 in 2020 and even thinking further than that, thinking about 2021, 2022, basically the next generation, they've done such a good job at really proving many companies wrong, really giving gamers exactly what they want, something that many other companies are just not willing to give us. And people feel really good. People feel really good and really confident going into the next generation of PlayStation console, not just because of the hardware, not just because of the rumors we're hearing and all of the positive talk surrounding, the power and the capability of the next gen console, but really it's about the games. I covered a interesting leak. I think it was like the other day, talking about how somebody apparently infiltrated or something like that a Sony meeting, and they put out official specifications, and it pointed to the PlayStation 5 being a somewhat beast console, like definitely a major upgrade if the leak was to be believed. And what a lot of people said in the comments were, that's great, and a really powerful machine would be great, but they just can't wait for the games. And a lot of you guys I know will be upgrading to the PS5 day one because that Sony's going to deliver the games. And anytime we have these conversations, I do get some flack from people who don't seem to understand that concept, that not only is Sony delivering like once in a generation type games and amazing gaming experiences, and I realize this now, but they're going against the grain in such a profound way with the approach that we're going to do single player games. No microtransactions, no tacked on multiplayer. Granted, some of their games do have these things. Like, I'm not trying to make it sound like Sony hasn't done any of these things or that they're not going to pursue some of these things, because we've talked about it before. We know that Sony has plans to, going into next generation, try to expand and have more multiplayer offerings, which there's no problem with that at all, as long as they continue to realize that it needs to supplement what you're known for at this point, what you're good at, what you're excellent at, and that is delivering those single-player narrative-driven experiences. There's nothing wrong with them wanting to supplement more multiplayer experiences. I myself love both, right? But there's just something so special about what they're achieving right now within this industry, when so many other companies are out here trying to make it sound like it can't be done, it's financially, not stable, it's not a smart move financially. And you have these companies like EA giving these excuses. Even Microsoft, to an extent, has had a hard time, I think, this generation, really proving that, well, first of all, that they're going to make truly amazing gaming experiences, but bringing out those single player experiences. Now, I'm not saying Microsoft hasn't had their single player experiences this generation. They have. They really have. And I'm not taking that away from them. But I think Sony has just kind of taken it to another level, and they've just executed on it in a way where, Microsoft, I think, looks at some of the games they've created this generation and they think, they were flops, or they were failures, or they just didn't perform the way we wanted them to, so we're just not going to really pursue it, which is why we haven't, in my opinion, seen sequels to some of these games like Sunset Overdrive and even Rise. I thought Rise was a great game, definitely underrated to an extent, and it's unfortunate. Even looking at Quantum Break, I had my problems with Quantum Break, but there was potential there, and it's a shame that we haven't seen anything, a follow-up to any of these things this generation. That doesn't mean we won't in the future, and I'm not trying to focus this conversation on Microsoft. I just have to point this out. It's not just Microsoft. Again, you look at Ubisoft, you look at EA, you look at a lot of Activision, a lot of these publishers, while they do occasionally bring out the single-player game, we know we have that Star Wars game to look forward to from EA, and, Activision did publish Sekiro, which is nice. And Ubisoft has their stuff, but we there is a fine line, in my opinion, drawn in the sand by Sony, saying, look, there's single player, there's like the occasional single player game, and then there's this idea that the foundation, your publishing, unit here with Sony Interactive, this is what it's founded on, and this is what they continue to pursue, and they give the developers the comfort to be able to say, we want to develop a single player story driven game, and we want to feel like there's no pressure if we don't want to add multiplayer, if we don't want to add microtransactions, and we don't want to add stuff that people just, frankly, gamers I should say, just really don't care about at the end of the day. But I also think about The Last of Us, right? And when I played The Last of Us, I did play the multiplayer. I didn't get too deep into it, but I was actually very impressed with what I played, and it made me realize, wow, like, not only did Naughty Dog deliver one of the most amazing single player experiences I've ever had the joy of experiencing, but their multiplayer section here is actually really good. It's really fun. It's much better than I was expecting. And to me, that's like an ideal situation. Obviously, we can't expect that from every developer, but that's the ideal situation. You get these amazing single-player gaming experiences, and then you have an amazing multiplayer component to go along with it. To me, that sounds awesome. But it's more important, in my opinion, that Sony, that is, continues to preserve this. And it's really just astounding to me that they've been able to pull this off in such a way where we're not talking like one solid single-player experience, or even two. I mean, there has been more than a handful here of these single-player narrative-driven games that it really just slaps the face of these companies that try to make it seem, that pretty much make these excuses that we don't want to hear as to why they're not doing the same thing, right? And they're constantly trying to put out these games as a service, and they're constantly trying to shove more and more microtransactions in our face. They're constantly trying to find more ways to squeeze money out of us rather than trying to just earn that, right? Like, that's the thing. Gamers will pay for a product that they feel is worth their money. And Sony has such phenomenal sales with their games, and there's a reason for that. Not only is it because the games that they're making look awesome, but it's mindshare. And that's something you can't really put a price on. You can't really force that. And this is something that I think a lot of these other companies don't seem to grasp, is that Sony has the mindshare because they earned it. And the way they earned it is by delivering amazing quality products that gamers have been asking for. Now, it hasn't been perfect, right? Like, not every single game that Sony has delivered throughout the entirety of this generation has been, God of War tier or Last of Us tier, nor does it need to be. That's not really the point. This isn't so much about critical reception. It's not even so much about sales. I mean, sales are an important part of this because, again, we buy the games, we give Sony the sales, we give them the numbers, and Sony sees that, and they get the message that, oh, we're doing this right. We're doing this right. We're doing it the right way. And you look at EA, and I know I'm talking about EA a lot in this video, and I know that, I'm not that channel. Like, I'm not the channel to sit here and make, a bunch of videos bashing EA. I do have my problems with them, like anybody else, but I think it's kind of obvious that they are really the company. And, again, there's also Activision and even Microsoft to an extent where they, even Phil Spencer went on record, I think it was like in 2017, kind of saying that single-player games just aren't really, basically I'm paraphrasing what he said, but they're just not as lucrative or something like that, and they're just not as easy. And it's just like, nobody wants to hear that. I know that was a while back, and maybe he's changed his tune since then. I don't know. We're going to have to see. But, you look at EA, and they're always reporting, with games like Anthem and even with Battlefield 5, how they're underperforming. Maybe that's because their expectations are way too high. That could definitely be a possibility. Or maybe it's just because these games aren't performing the way you expected them to because you're not listening to your core audience. You're not giving them what they want. Instead you're trying to force more microtransactions. You're trying to just go against the grain. Meanwhile, you see Sony over here, winning Game of the Year. You see them touting their sales, how their sales are constantly surpassing their expectations. And these studios are thriving, and the gamers are having a blast, and it's a mutual situation. And that's why I just think it's kind of astounding. What's more astounding than Sony's ability to maintain this and continue this and hopefully continue to push forward with this in a meaningful way going forward, which I have all the confidence in the world that that's exactly what they're going to do. What's even more astounding is that other companies aren't looking at this and saying, we need to do this too. Like, that's what's crazy to me. I mean, I understand that a game like Days Gone, and I will admit that Days Gone is a huge inspiration for me wanting to talk about this, because it just really has made me think, like, this is an amazing experience. Like, you just don't get these experiences that often anymore, or not as often as you used to, where I'm just playing Days Gone and I'm just in this world, man. Like, I don't see any microtransactions. I don't have to worry about multiplayer. I don't have to worry about co-op. I don't have to worry about paid DLC or anything like that. I'm just playing this game and I'm immersed in the story. I'm immersed with the characters, and it's just an amazing feeling. And that's pretty much how it's been since I've came over here to PlayStation. And it's just kind of mind-blowing, and it's just crazy to me, right? Like, it's just crazy to me to think that it's so difficult, or some of these publishers and these developers make it seem like it's just so difficult to do this when you have Sony, which in my opinion is the gold standard, showing you how it's done. Now, don't get me wrong, like, there's a lot of talent behind this. I'm not trying to make it sound like Sony is getting necessarily lucky, or they just one day said, we're going to make great games, and they just made great games. It's not that easy. It's not that simple. I understand that. They have cultivated a lot of talent, but what people need to understand, and I think what people do understand, and what they respect most, is that Sony took the time, they took the money, and they put the effort. And I'm not trying to just give the credit to Sony, because it's like, it's not just Sony as a company, right, and like the executives, because we do understand at the end of the day it's about money. I'm not trying to make it seem like it's not, okay? But we have to understand that certain individuals within the company, or certain developers, there's just been this tonal shift where they took the time and they understood the basic concept of, we need to cultivate talent. Like, we really do. We need to bring more talented developers on. We need to create an environment where these talented individuals can really achieve their full potential. And that's such an incredibly difficult thing to do in the business world. It really is. When you're talking about money, you're talking about, if you watch the Raising Kratos documentary, which I did, it was absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I feel so grateful to be able to watch that and get a glimpse in that type of creative process. It's rare you get to see that, and to see the struggle that these developers and these studios go through on like a human level, where you see, like, this is their livelihood. You see they have wives, and they have husbands, and they have children. They have families, and they need to provide. And you realize, like, that for some of these studios, man, it's make or break. It's sink or swim. And to see Sony give them the type of opportunity, like if you saw at the beginning of that documentary, it really showed that Sony was doubling down on Santa Monica and investing heavily in them. And there was a lot of pressure on them to deliver. And at one point, you see Cory Barlog and his team, and they thought, oh man, we're not going to be able to do this. Are we going to be able to pull this off? And there's just a lot of doubt there. But they push through, and they realize at the end, like, there's a vision they have. And on the developer level, man, like, it's a mutual thing here. Like, God of War and what Sony Santa Monica did would have never been possible if Sony didn't give them that opportunity. You see what I'm saying? And this is where I hope Microsoft, EA, Ubisoft, Activision, any other publisher, because there are some really other great ones out there too, but any other, like, big publisher that's really just going again, not doing what they should be to some extent, I hope they're all paying attention. I hope they all watch that documentary, and I hope they all see the success, if they haven't seen it already, that Sony has been achieving with their single-player games. And I'm just over here, I'm playing Days Gone, I'm watching this Raising Kratos documentary, and I know that there's some people who think maybe I give Sony too much credit, but I don't think I am. I think that every ounce of credit I'm giving them, they deserve it. They earned it. And I can back that up with my experiences so far over here on PlayStation. To think that people and gamers who bought PlayStations earlier on in the life cycle have been getting this pretty much, I don't want to say throughout the entire generation, but most of the generation, wow. I mean, that's something, man. And I think that this is why it feels like people are just eager and 100% willing and ready to just dive into the PlayStation 5 next generation, because they know, like, this is what we can expect. Will Sony make some mistakes? Of course they will. Will there be some things that happen that make us scratch our heads at times? Of course there will be. Are there going to be times where, a game that they put out just doesn't land or doesn't deliver in exactly the way we were hoping? Of course it will. Days Gone is a recent, the most recent example of that. But something I realized is that even with a game like Days Gone not getting, the astounding review scores that maybe some of us were hoping for, a lot of people are out here playing it themselves and saying, this is a great game. Like, this is a great game. Like, it almost feels like Days Gone, not to harp on this again, because I'm not trying to make this video about this, but it almost feels like Days Gone, like, is sitting at the type of Metacritic score it is because it's not God of War, right? Because it's just like Sony has, some of these Sony studios have done such a phenomenal job in their game creation that it's like, who could really live up to that, right? Like, I don't even think the studio making a sequel to their own game feels like they can live up to that. So, having that expectation, I think, for some people is unrealistic. But I don't know, man. For me, I just had to make this video because it's important, in my opinion. As somebody who wants to continue to see more single-player games made, I feel like, hey, I have my little small platform here, and I know that a lot of you guys can back me up on this and agree with me, and anybody who's experienced some of these games can, I think, wholeheartedly agree when I say we need more of this. Not just from Sony. We know we're going to continue to get this from Sony, but we need more of this in the industry, period. We need to see more studios and, more importantly, more publishers looking at this and saying, we need our own God of War. We need our own Days Gone. We need to make these games. And I think hopefully we will see that, but we're going to have to see, guys. But yeah, that does it for the video. I apologize it turned out so long, but once I start talking about this stuff, I really get into it, and I just start to get kind of passionate about it. So I hope you did enjoy it at the very least, enjoyed the commentary. Be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments below about what we talked about here. Leave the video a like if you did enjoy it, or if you agree with what I have to say. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share the video out on top of all that. It helps tremendously. But until next time, guys, take care.